Picture this. You're standing on solid ground, forest around you, oak and hazel stretching to the horizon. Deer move through the trees. Someone, a long time ago, has just walked this path. Now, take that entire world and lower it 20 meters under the North Sea. That is Doggerland. Not a myth, not a legend, a home. And for 6,000 years, we forgot it was ever there. But here is where things get strange. New DNA, pulled not from bones, but from mud at the bottom of the sea, says this land was alive far earlier than we ever believed. It says we've been telling the story wrong, and if we want to understand why, we have to go back to the beginning. Most of us learn history as a list of places that are still there. Rome, the pyramids, you can stand in them. But Doggerland is different. It was a country the size of Washington State, and it isn't there anymore. It's a seabed, a place you could walk across once, from what is now England to what is now Germany, without ever seeing the ocean. And that's the first thing history tried to forget, that Britain was never an island by nature. It was made an island, by water, by time, and by something else we'll get to. So now we arrive at the question that should be bothering you right now. If an entire country vanished, how did we find out it was real? For a long time, the proof was indirect. Fishermen, for generations, dredged up things that shouldn't be at sea. A bone, a tool, a fragment of antler. The sea was giving back pieces of a story it had swallowed. But here is the detail that turned everything. In 2026, a team of scientists did something patient and unglamorous. They took sediment, mud essentially, from the floor of the North Sea, 252 samples, and in that mud, they found something extraordinary. DNA, not from a person, from the forest itself. Oak, elm, hazel, trees that had grown there more than 16,000 years ago, thousands of years earlier than anyone thought possible. While much of northern Europe was locked in ice, Doggerland was green. It was warm. It was habitable. And in that same mud, they found a tree, a kind of walnut relative that we believed had vanished 400,000 years before. It didn't. It was still there, growing, on Doggerland. Not myth, not legend, evidence. So if the forests were real, the next question is obvious. Who lived there? And this is where the story bends. For decades, archaeologists had a strange problem. The earliest people of Britain were hard to find. The record had gaps. It was as if the first humans simply weren't there for a long stretch when they should have been. Doggerland is the answer to that mystery. The earliest people weren't missing. They were next door, on a vast, low-lying, resource-rich plain that we later drowned. I want you to picture them, because this is the part the dates and battles always miss. These were hunter-gatherers following herds, fishing in rivers, watching the sea slowly, very slowly, take back their coastline, generation by generation. But watch what happens next, because this stable, generational goodbye is not how the story actually ends. Imagine your great-great-grandchild standing where you stand now, and the water is a little closer than it was in your childhood. That is not a catastrophe. That is a lifetime. And Doggerland was many lifetimes. Until, for reasons that still divide the researchers who study it, it wasn't. So how does a country the size of a nation disappear? Not suddenly. That's the part everyone gets wrong. At the end of the last ice age, the glaciers began to melt, and melt, and melt. Sea levels rose, slowly, relentlessly. The lowland went first, then the higher ground. What was once a wide, open plain became a shrinking archipelago, islands, then shallows, then nothing. And here is the truth that should reframe everything you've been told. The sea did this on its own. No wave, no single cataclysm, just water and time, and a land with nowhere to retreat to. Which brings us to the myth, the one everyone thinks they know, the tsunami. Since 8,000 years ago, off the coast of Norway, a vast section of the continental shelf collapsed. It was one of the largest submarine landslides we know of. It sent a tsunami racing across the North Sea, and the story that stuck, the clean, dramatic story, is that this wave destroyed Doggerland. One moment, a country, the next, gone. It's a good story. It is not, the evidence says, the whole truth. Parts of Doggerland survived that wave. They stayed above water for centuries more. The tsunami was a wound, a brutal one, but it was not the killer. The sea had already been winning for thousands of years before the wave ever arrived.
Why does that matter?
Because history likes a single villain, one clean cause, a wave you can blame. The truth is quieter and worse. Doggerland wasn't destroyed so much as it was abandoned, one shoreline at a time, until there was nothing left to stand on. And here is the detail that turned all of it. The people didn't vanish either. They moved. Their descendants are still here, in the DNA of the people of Britain and Northern Europe. Doggerland didn't die. It changed address. So why should a drowned country, 6,000 years gone, hold your attention for one more minute? Because Doggerland is a mirror. It is what happens when the sea rises and a people must choose. It is a warning written in mud and tree DNA. A whole world lost not in one dramatic instant, but in 10,000 small surrenders. But it is also something else. Proof. Proof that the people we call the first Europeans, whoever they were, had a home we almost never found. Proof that history is not a fixed record. It is a place we are still excavating, one seabed core at a time. Some modern historians will debate the details. Good. That is how evidence works. But the land was real. The oak and the hazel were real. The deer that once moved through those trees were real. The people were real. I have no name. I exist beyond the record. You are the record now. If this journey through the drowned past is one you want to continue, subscribe, because the next land we go looking for may be even stranger than this one.